Greetings, friends. Operational situation at the front on the 23rd of April. In the end, we will talk about UCAID, one of the largest aid packages, perhaps the largest. Well, let's start with a review of the front, but I have to make an important remark. So yesterday, I managed to read one of your comments that the comments under the latest videos are closed. I was really surprised, but it turned out to be so. Subsequently, those comments disappeared under the third video, and I started looking at YouTube. The fact is that there is such a function, they can disable comments if the comments go well. That's what was just under my videos. So I turned it on several times, but they don't turn on, so it's possible there will be no comments on the result under this video. But now we turn to the front. In the Limansky direction, active fighting continues east of Turnov, in the Seversky direction in the Bogdanovka area, and along the railway in the direction of the excavation. In this sector of the front as a whole, we have no significant changes. Ivanovskaya, Bogdanovka. Let's start with this section. So Bogdanovka without significant changes, although there were several attempts from the Russian side to advance to the Orlov Tract. It was possible to repel the attacks. And as for Ivanovsky, a successful counterattack was carried out here to the south of the Afu. It was possible to dislodge Russian troops from their position at the intersection, just the same T-shaped, and take control. These are the soldiers of the 92nd Assault Brigade. We have added an advance on this section, on a section up to 620 meters wide, to a depth of 1 and 6 kilometers. That is, the entire forest belt came under the control of the Apu, and those positions where the red zone was present, and reduced. The fighting continues. We see that they no longer focused on Ivanovskoye. Recently they have transferred these forces more than Bogdanovka, well, of course. The Yar Hours and the Golyubovsky Mortar Reserve, well, of course, under Ivanovskoye. This made it possible for the Apu to successfully counterattack. Therefore, it is of course too early to talk about a flank strike, but in any case, forces are now directed from the Russian side to prevent the Afu from advancing further, and not to storm the Ivanovo forest. This is the situation we have in the watch direction as a whole. We turn to the Pokrovsky direction, where we also have the main changes taking place in Novokalinov. Without significant changes in the positional nature of the fighting of the Q. The heaviest, fiercest battles for the settlement continue. So yesterday we added changes, today there are the following. Russian troops managed to advance further to a depth of up to 600 meters, including both construction. This is what was taken under control yesterday, and they advanced to the Enterprise. And one of the buildings also came under their control. Conditionally for today, closer to the morning, I would say, the situation looks like this. So far, the depth is up to 600 meters. The enemy naturally transfers forces to this section of the front. We have already talked with you that forces are being transferred to the Dacha village, well, of course, from it to Osheretino. And yesterday on the evening broadcast, we just talked to you that there could be a blow to the Novobakhmutovka for leveling. And unfortunately it happened. Here, Russian troops managed to advance on a front section, up to 125 kilometers wide, to a depth of 104 kilometers to a T-shaped intersection in the center of Novobakhmutovka. Therefore, the situation looks like this. Well, now we are considering it all from a general angle. It means naturally that we said that they dig in the fields as well, so a strike on Novobakhmutovka is possible. But they needed to protect themselves from a flank attack, which, in fact, they did in this case, taking partial control of Novobakhmutovka. In other words, this partial success allows them to strengthen the transfer to Osheretina, that is, where we have the dominant height. Now they are already talking about the height of 245, but it is a little northwest of the village itself. It's too early to speak for it. 241 altitude taken. That is, now, naturally, they will transfer forces against this background, in order to further carry out assault operations. Well, the main battles we have, I would say, will be approximately in this area, where there is also construction. The Russian troops are now targeting this area, having taken a number of positions in the center and at the enterprise. The main focus now is on the vector, or rather, the north and northeast, that is, on the area of maximum multi-story development. The fighting continues. And at the same time, we also have small changes and clarifications in Burdik. Here, on the front section, up to a width of up to 500 kilometers to a depth of up to 200 meters. The general advance was, well, a number of clarifications. In general, on this sector of the front, it is possible to restrain Russian troops for the most part, but, as we understand, they will now place more emphasis on the next one, because this is the dominant height, which will give them the opportunity. But based on the situation in Novobakhmutovka, to bypass the positions that we have in Burdik. Then there is a Solovyev strike in the south direction as well. We will look, as they say, now the enemy is focusing on this section of the front. Here we also need to add that we talked about the previous broadcasts for the technique. There are some problems with the Russian Federation, the Russian army as a whole with equipment. There is a recent article by Forbes which reports that, well, conditionally, it is at least 2 years of the equipment that they have. Bearing in mind what has been preserved, these stocks are being restored, what is being repaired, what is being produced, will last for about 2 years of active offensive actions like this. This is one moment. Yes, indeed it is, we will not deny it. But it all needs to be restored, upgraded somewhere, repaired somewhere, and, accordingly, sent to the logistics front. Therefore, they have some small problem, and due to this problem, we see that they also often go in a bright direction, well, in fact. After a long positivity, although they have accumulated some forces there, yes, they even sink during the Apu counterattacks. Therefore, such a moment, as they say. In general, time will tell. The main focus and all the equipment, they are now transferring it to the Pokrov direction, initially Avdiivka. Donetsk's main emphasis is on this sector of the front. Moving on. As for May Day, we did not receive any new news from this section, and accordingly, we did not observe any visual changes from drone frames for this section of the front. Krasnogorovka is a similar situation. Georgiivka, in general the Kurakovsky direction, Novomikhailivka, there are fights. This information was already after the evening broadcast yesterday, something that came in the morning, but let's briefly give it. The first one is the Garden Association machine builder. There are fights for it, this is the first moment. They reinforce attacks. Now we will analyze this point, there are some clarifications here. The second point is that there is some activation north of Novomikhailivka, that is, from the fortified areas of the menagerie. I would say so far that the vector is conditionally west-southwest, it is no longer in the direction of victory. The Kurakov direction, namely the South Donetsk section of the front, in the direction of conditionally Proskovayevka. And the Garden Association. The machine builder is currently focused on this area. And at the same time, they are making further attempts along the Salt Shaker beam to move in a westerly direction. Here the vector is enough, the vector is so western, but the front section is wide enough, so they try everything. Including the support of armored vehicles, that is, they attack not only with infantry. And, of course, they are now making attempts to take another forest belt under control, which we have west of Novomikhailivka. According to those frames of visual information, the enemy planted his flag in the westernmost part, was accordingly present in this area, and, as I have already said, is trying to enter the neighboring forest belt, establish control over it and make changes. I hope this area is not covered by the screen. Yes, it's not closed. So, we have a little clarification in the Garden Association. The situation for yesterday, the situation for today. Here, it means that at the intersection it turned into a red zone, but in the Garden Association itself, it has slightly decreased. Naturally, now they need rotation, they will transfer additional forces, some will be withdrawn after Novomikhailivka, as it was already in the neighboring sectors of the front, and they will definitely increase the pressure. So far, the main goal for them is the forest belt, that is, to align. Conditionally align the front line here along the forest belt. Moving on. Harvest, Veliko-Novoselkovsko direction. A very interesting point, it is analyzed in detail. There was an attack from the Russian side. I also wrote this in my summary in the morning and in the telegram. And that means there are two locations, but they are both very close. The attack was launched by Russian troops. What did you try? They tried to advance to the T-shaped intersection, and this is a forest belt under the control of the APU. And a friendly fire was opened, so to speak, friendly fire from the Russian side. They themselves knocked it out. And Dambiv has already published these shots. Well, several resources have published. In general, what they regularly complain about, Russian military and media soldiers, is that bad interaction, and, let's say, they could really have a really serious promotion could happen, but it was not destined. They destroyed both armored vehicles themselves. This is an empty Elb and a tank. Therefore, the situation remains unchanged, but the distance here is more than a few kilometers, what they have passed. Indeed, they could have made a landing on foot, and, accordingly, take control of one of the forest belts, and, accordingly, the neighboring one would have passed. They would have increased pressure, and they would have had a wider coverage already for attacks on the harvest. But let's just say their actions failed them. This is very important for us. First of all, this, of course, shows that there is something to work on. It is necessary to carry out additional mining. And so on, and so on. But, actually, we see that the enemy risks attacking at such rather serious distances on this sector of the front, but in any case, we do not record any changes here. It's just that the situation itself in the third year of the war, it's very interesting, indicative, I would say indicative. It's indicative. And in the Orekhovsky direction of the work ledge, there were several comments, but in general, we do not fix any changes in the geolinking of drone frames here. Everything is either red or gray zone. Again, they are attacking with the support of the same Chinese Dizer cross motorcycle all-terrain vehicles, and still motorcycles are trying to transfer forces as quickly as possible, although small, but still to the southern part on Cherevnaya Street. But without any changes.